I'll be glad to take any questions.
The referendum bill doesn't pass. Would the city now consider the idea of doing a referendum on its own without legislative approval? Or without legislative approval?
What I'd like to do now is to meet with my staff, sit back and reassess the entire referendum environment, determine whether or not it's in our best interest to continue pursuit of that. I still feel that it is in the best interest of the city of Fort Wayne, our citizens, to examine this and to determine whether or not they want gaming as a form of entertainment for this community, as part of our entertainment venue. With that being said, we need to take a step back now, take a look at the political environment, take a look at the legislative environment, since next year is an election year, and determine whether or not we wish to pursue it. And I'll be with my staff and we'll discuss that.
It's not possible to do one for this November if the city just does it on its own without having the legislature involved?
No.
It's not possible.
From your perspective, why did those efforts fail to get it in the budget?
Candidly speaking, I believe, quite frankly, the legislature had so much on their plate this legislative session. And because of that, they were unable not only to address a lot of the issues that many of the legislators themselves wanted, but they had to go into special session because they couldn't get the budget passed. They just had to pull some things off the table in order to get everything done by the end of this month, and that's exactly what they, or by the end of June, and that's exactly what they did. I think, again, many of the issues that were not addressed this legislative session will come back in study committee or will come back up again next year.
Are you saying that you feel like that if in fact we would now look at a referendum in 2010, that there are some complications with that that make you pause a little bit, meaning that that issue gets diluted because of other election issues being settled in November?
It could be. I don't want to speculate at this point, but again, my staff and I think just as the legislature is going to be having some study committees taking place this summer, my staff and I will be doing the same thing. We'll be studying this issue as well as some others to determine what is appropriate to take back to our legislators for next legislative session and the probability of certain issues passing.
Has there been any thought to instead of a referendum, the city doing some kind of, the city would most likely have to spend money on a referendum, just doing some scientific polling on the issue, other than taking?
Well, certainly that's a possibility. Whether or not we want to invest any money at this point, and again, who would pay for that poll? Polls aren't cheap, so who would pay for that? Do I want to ask the taxpayers to pay for that? Do I want to pay for it out of ask a special interest group to pay for it? Well, if I do that, then are we going to be beholden to them? So there's a lot of, it's a complicated question. We've heard from quite a few people already, and again, as I mentioned in my remarks, we have not just sat back while the legislature's been working in Indianapolis. We have been meeting with civic groups, we've been meeting with religious groups, we've been meeting with neighborhood associations, we've been meeting with partnerships, asking them for their input. I received a lot of letters and telephone calls from citizens expressing their interest in gaming. And quite frankly, it's been a very interesting mix of responses. Some vehemently opposed, and understandably so, and some of them who feel that it is an appropriate form of entertainment for Northeast Indiana, since Northwest Indiana has it, Southeast Indiana, Southwest Indiana, Central Indiana. Why are we void of that type of entertainment in Northeast Indiana? So I get it from both sides, and that's okay. That's exactly what we wanted to happen. So that's okay.
Have you done, in this time period, have you gotten any closer to formulating your own sense for whether this is what we should do? I know you continue to say you want the people to be heard, but have you in any way crystallized more in your mind what you want?
I am convinced more than ever that this needs to go to referendum because of what I just said. The amount of responses that I have received from our community, from both sides, convinced me more than ever that this is a decision that's beyond me making as a sole decision. We have tens of thousands of adults in this community who certainly have a right to determine what's best for this community. I don't have any problem making decisions on a daily basis affecting our community. That's my job. But there are certain decisions that we need to use the democratic process to determine what's best for our community. Because if we determine that gaming is a form of entertainment that's going to serve this community as part of its entertainment venue, it's going to be a long-term decision. So we need to make sure that that is the appropriate decision. The best way to determine that is to ask our citizens.
Do you have a ballpark figure of just how much the city has spent on just the effort over the last year now?
Over the past year, it's less than $100,000 over the past year. And that's for all of the consulting. I think we've used 3 different firms. Two different firms, excuse me.
But with that's including the
How much-
studies
how
and
much, remember?
consulting.
3,000 a month.
It's been about $3,000 a month, so $36,000.
36,000.
With
And then you
the
could,
studies and everything? So
Yes.
you're still going to be paid? Are they going to continue to stay on the city payroll?
That's another area we're going to sit back and determine whether or not it's an appropriate move for us at this time from a gaming perspective. Now, when it comes to the city utilities, the city electric, we will continue to keep them on because that's an ongoing issue that's above and beyond the state. Even though we tried to get some legislation passed on our behalf, those negotiations continue. Our lease expires next March, so we need to continue that work even without the state legislature in session.
Do you think that lobbying money was well spent at this point?
I do.
Why so?
Because, first of all, we needed to determine whether or not gaming, I'm assuming you're talking about gaming,
Yes.
whether or not gaming was even an appropriate measure to take before our legislature. So we hired some consultants to help us make that determination. They came back and said, yes, there are members of the legislature who are willing to talk to you about this, both at the Senate level and at the House level. Then we need to determine what type of legislation. Do we push for an active piece of legislation to enable us to do it, or do we go to referendum? They came back and said, from talking to Senate Pro Tem, Senator Long and others, that a referendum would probably be the best way to move this thing forward. So that's the measure that we took. Then we had to push it through the legislature to let all the legislators know at the House and Senate level that, in fact, referendum was what we desired. That's what we thought was in the best interest of this city of Fort Wayne. And if, in fact, they were going to pass any legislation dealing with it for the city of Fort Wayne, that was the approach that we wanted to take. So no, I thought it was money well spent.
And you mentioned Senator Long. Is there any disappointment that he was pretty much the main reason both the bills, the electric bill and the gaming bill, did not make it through the state budget?
I have not had a chance to talk to the senator. I would like to have an opportunity to talk to him now that the legislature has adjourned, to find out what his reasons were for his actions. I don't want to speculate at this point.